Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about the poetry of Sir John Suckling, whom I'm reading out of the Cavalier Poets, an anthology from Dover Thrift Editions. As that title suggests, Sir John was one of the Cavalier poets. This group that includes, of course, people like Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, and Richard Lovelace. They were followers of King Charles I. They were monarchists. They were very, very interested in courtly love and sort of romantic love and this sort of dedication to the culture of love. They were devoutly high church Anglicans. And they often embraced this sort of carpe diem mentality. So one of the things that is interesting about Sir John is, so Sir John has a complex relationship to love poetry, or perhaps to love itself, without sort of trying to read too much into the poems as reflecting the poet, because they don't necessarily. But whereas someone like Herrick is very sort of openly sexual in the poet persona's desires, and slightly naughty in the way that he approaches romantic relationships, and whereas Carrie is very much sort of misogynistic in his view, Sir John Suckling seems to have a more complicated relationship. There is a degree of sort of satirical critique in his approach to sort of courtly love, courtly romance, but there also seems to be a sort of deep dedication to or desire for the constancy of the beloved. So I'm going to take you through several of Sir John's love poems, and we'll sort of see these themes developing. So this one is called Woman's Constancy. There never yet was woman made, nor shall but to be cursed, and oh, that I, fond I, should first of any lover this truth at my own charge to other fools discover. You that have promised yourselves propriety in love, know women's hearts like straw do move, and what we call their sympathy is but love to jet in general. All mankind are alike to them, and though we iron find that never was a lodestone joined. Sorry, I'm kind of fucking this one up. That never with a lodestone joined, 'tis not the iron's fault. It is because the lodestone yet was never brought. If when a gentle bee hath fallen and labored to his power, anew succeeds not to that flower, but passes by, 'tis to be thought the gallant elsewhere loads his thigh. For still the flowers ready stand, one buzzes round about, one lights and tastes, gets in, gets out, all always useful use them, till all their sweets are gone, and all again refuse them. So this is a really striking sort of satire on the nature of courtly love, because it is supposedly about women's constancy, right? And it starts there, right? It's this idea that the Cavaliers were very interested in, that women are unfaithful, that they have affairs with men other than the poet persona, realistically, but other than the beloved, their husband, whatever it is. And of course, the striking irony, which Sir John seems to be getting to here is that in order for that critique to follow, it means that the men must be having affairs with the women, right? So he seems to recognize in a way that perhaps Carey doesn't in his much more misogynistic incel type poetry. Sir John Suckling seems to recognize that the culture of court in which women are in which there is this at least anxiety about women continually having affairs, is driven by men's desire to continually have affairs with them. And so that's where we sort of come to with this whole bit about if where a gentle bee hath fallen and labored to his power, anew succeeds not to that flower, but passes by, 'tis to be thought the gallant elsewhere loads his thigh. For still the flowers ready stand, one buzzes round about, one lights and tastes, gets in, gets out, I'll always use them till all their sweets are gone, and all again refuse them. This is about the courtiers, the male courtiers, and their attitude toward the women. And so, I mean, basically what it means, basically what it's saying, essentially, as I understand it, is we have this deep anxiety about women having affairs, and yet we are constantly pushing the women in our lives to have affairs. And so there's a sort of paradox here, right? Where women are blamed for doing the thing that we are trying to get them to do. This idea of bees buzzing around flowers is metaphorically male courtiers pursuing the women of the court to have sexual relationships. And so I think Sir John sort of approaches this in a playful way, which again is quite different from someone like Carey, who would approach this much more in a women are inconstant, women betray me, the poet persona, and all this bullshit. So there is a sort of playfulness here. But also in Sir John's poetry, we have this sort of deep concern about fidelity, truth, and constancy, right? This sort of idea of being faithful, which again is sort of worked against by the whole Cavalier ethos of seizing the day, enjoying life, wine, women, and song, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die, all of this stuff. But if we look, so there's a number of his poems that are just called song. So this is the one that starts, no, no, fair heretic, it needs must be. And it's about this sort of idea that if love is not constant, consistent, and devoted, then it is untrustworthy. It is fundamentally unlove, if you will. So this is song. No, no, fair heretic, it needs must be, but any love in me, and worse for thee, for were it in my power to love thee now this hour, more than I did the last, 'twould then so fall I might not love at all. Love that can flow and can admit increase, admits as well an ebb, and may grow less. True love is still the same, the torrid zones and those more frigid ones it must not know, for love grown cold or hot is lust or friendship not the thing we have, and that's a flame would die held down or up too high. Then think I love more than I can express, but would love more, could I but love thee less. And so this is a sort of interesting inversion of the sort of typical idea of like increasing one's love, right? Becoming more devoted to the beloved, more dedicated. What Suckling is saying here essentially is if love can increase, if it can grow greater or stronger, then it necessarily follows that it can also decrease or grow weaker. And it's sort of an interesting idea, right? This sort of point that love must always be constant, or it is untrustworthy. Fundamentally, any alteration to the nature of love, even when it is an increase in the quality or quantity of love, fundamentally signals the potential for a loss of love. And so again, I think this is sort of a deep anxiety that we see really across Sir John's poetry. And we have this other sort of anti-love type poem, another one called Song, ironically enough. This one starts, I prithee spare me, gentle boy. The gentle boy, of course, being a reference to Cupid. But this is a sort of request to not be in love. So again, we've got these sort of anxieties here. So this is Song, another song. I prithee spare me, gentle boy, press me no more for that slight coy, that foolish trifle of an heart. I swear it will not do its part, though thou dost thine, employ'st thy power and art. For through long custom it has known the little secrets, and is grown sullen and wise, will have its will, and like old hawks pursue that still, that make least sport, flies only where it can kill. Some youth that has not made his story will think perchance the pain's the glory, and mannerly sit out love's feast. I shall be carving of the best, rudely call for the last course for the rest. And oh, when once that course is past, how short a time the feast doth last. Men rise away and scarce say grace, or civilly once think the face that did invite but seek another place. So this one, again, is quite a striking one to me, because there is this sort of anti-love component. Spare me, Cupid, from your power and art, etc., etc. But there's also the sort of carpe diem embrace of enjoyment, right? I will sit at the feast. I will call for dessert. Men rise away and scarce say grace. This idea of I'm going to enjoy not love necessarily, but I'm going to enjoy wine, women, and song because life is short, right? So yeah, it's a sort of interesting one. And a lot of Sir John's poetry, the other sort of big thing that gets rolled into Sir John's poetry, including his love poetry, is this martial imagery. Because Sir John served in the First Bishops' War under King Charles I. He had raised a regiment, or I think it was a regiment, but he raised troops to go and serve in the First Bishops' War. It says a contingent of 100 troops in the introduction in this edition. And so he had this martial career, this military career. And that ends up getting sort of rolled into his poetry and his conceptions of love. And we see that, for instance, in a poem like "'Tis now since I sate down before. 'Tis now since I sate down before that foolish fort a heart. Time strangely spent, a year and more, and still I did my part. Made my approaches from her hand unto her lip did rise, and did already understand the language of her eyes. Proceeded on with no less art, my tongue was engineer. I thought to undermine the heart by whispering in the ear. When this did nothing, I brought down great cannon oaths and shot 1,000 to the town, and still it yielded not. I then resolved to starve the place by cutting off all kisses, praising and gazing on her face and all such little blisses. To draw her out, and from her strength I drew all batteries in, and brought myself to lie at length as if no siege had been. When I had done what man could do, and thought the place my own, the enemy lay quiet too, and smiled at all was done. I sent to know from whence and where these hopes and this relief. The spy informed honour was there, and did command in chief. March, march, quoth I, the word straight give. Let's lose no time, but leave her. That giant upon air will live, and hold it out forever. To such a place our camp remove, as will no siege abide. I hate a fool that starves her love, only to feed her pride. And so again, this is very much rooted in martial imagery and this notion of military conquest being linked to the approach to love, the extended metaphor of laying siege to a woman's heart or her sexual virtue or whatever it is, and this becomes a way of thinking about the nature of sexual relationships, sexual pursuit, romantic relationships and pursuit, etc., in the Cavalier period, right? There is, again, this, it sort of comes back to what Sir John seemed to identify, ironically, in the poem Woman's Constancy, that while women may be blamed for having affairs, it is the men who pursue those affairs. It is the men who lay siege to them, who attempt to conquer them in these sort of military analogous terms. And so there is a substantial degree of irony, lack of self-awareness, perhaps, and of course hypocrisy in the anxiety about women having affairs within a court system in which men are continually pursuing those affairs.